I am the mom of a child who is a recovering drug addict. Um, and as a consequence of his addiction, became very, very sick. And I'm willing to tell his story from my point of view. Our family was a relatively normal family, I would say. His upbringing was basically middle class. He went to uh, regular schools. We went to private schools at times. When we thought he was troubled, he went to psychologists. We brought him to psychologists. We tried to do as much as we could to help him. I noticed that there was a drug problem I started suspecting, and I played the role that I know a lot of mothers play, and that is detective. And so I was trying to catch him in lies, and I was very good at it. And I would be the type of mother that would search through the bedroom. I would throw stuff out. I would cover up for Jeff. I'd be the one who would call the teachers and come up with all sorts of excuses. I mean, I partly believed it. I saw my very loving, warm, creative son becoming more and more distant. And I was basically willing to do anything to get him back. I was so ashamed. I for the longest time of covering up for his behavior, whether it be with grandparents, great grandmother, our friends. I did not, I hedged when talking about him. I was embarrassed and ashamed, and it took me a long time to be able to talk about it. I was also extremely angry, and the anger in many ways helped me, because the angrier I got, the more strongly I believed in, saying no, establishing boundaries, all the things that I later learned were important. Well, what happened was, we had followed, let go, let God, and when he left jail, after a few months in jail, he did go back to the girl he had been with, and they did start using that same next day, and he got an infection, and it was a systemic blood infection, and it settled in his heart, and they needed to do emergency valve replacement, and some of the bacteria went up to his brain. This is all from shooting up. The bacteria lodged in his brain, and after a few months he ended up, those bacteria weakened the blood vessels in his brain, and he had a huge cerebral hemorrhage. And this is just after he had been in treatment, had actually been sober for a number of months, and was really on the right track, and tragically that happened. And that, put him, back to a state where he couldn't really finish out the program he was in because of his short-term memory loss, because he couldn't be independent. He was ready in this program to go to a more independent level. It was a long-term program. And unfortunately, he was not able to complete it. So there was like a place in Tampa where people with brain injuries can go with supported living, and we had him go there. And it was not a drug place, but they were aware of his drug history. And unfortunately, when he had been in the hospital with that cerebral hemorrhage, he had picked up another fungal infection which went throughout his body. So a year after one heart surgery, he needed a second open heart surgery. And during that second heart surgery, he had a massive stroke, which left him blind, which left him with his left arm not able to move. He basically had to learn everything over again. And then I was just sad. Yeah, that just left me totally sad that here he was making progress. Certainly so much had already happened to him. We hoped he learned his lesson, but we weren't positive that he had. Even after the first cerebral hemorrhage, when he was in an environment where he could use, he smoked weed. And so I don't know. I was just very sad about that, and not sure that that he was committed to recovery. And now that he's not independent, cannot easily get anything on his own, it's kind of forced the recovery. And honestly, I don't know what would be if that weren't the case. We realized that we really couldn't point to one thing as a cause, and that anything could have contributed. One of the things we did think about later on was the possibility of genetics, because we adopted Jeff, and we didn't know for sure, but one of the treatment facilities that we went to, when getting his biological history, and we told them about adoption, and we told them about certain biological things that the biological mother had experienced, seizures and certain things, that really was the first time that someone said to us, I have a feeling that it may be genetic, because of that kind of history often goes along with some drug history that maybe you weren't told about. So we don't know for sure, but that's a possibility. And the fact that he has Tourette's now is also something that is a neurological disorder that is often genetically inherited. Besides anger and resentment, and for a while it's like, why am I the victim? He's the drug addict and I'm the one who's like being punished for it. And it took a while for me to get beyond that. I had to go through the 12 steps. I had a sponsor, and I met once a week for an hour and a half, and went through, and it took me about a year and a half or two to go through all the steps to finally get the type of acceptance I needed to be able to feel happier. Get to a group. That would be the first, absolutely the first thing. Go to Al-Anon or Nar-Anon, where the people there understand what you're going through. They have all been there. They have all felt it. That is the most important thing I have ever done for myself. We started when Jeff, in the very beginning, we were told about a life coach, and this is a life coach that lived in Oregon. We're in Florida.
Right.
Well, I called, and she was the first to open my eyes to the possibility that that I was being abused in this relationship in a way, and not physically or anything, but verbally, and that I shouldn't have to take that because he was using drugs and wasn't able to control himself. And she had suggested going to a meeting, but before we even had a chance to do that, we sent him to one of the first treatment centers that he went to, and it was required that the parents go to Al-Anon or Nar-Anon meetings. Changed my life. Made me not just able to deal with my son a little better, but everyone in my life I was able to deal with better.